Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about video games. Video games, slavery, and the role of psychologists in this industry. Now, I've talked about this briefly in the past, but there is a news article that came out yesterday that was so good I left it out of the news because I wanted to give it its own separate show. And it deals with video games. And, of course, I'm not a huge gamer. You guys know that. That's why I don't have a lot of gaming stuff on the channel. Just not big into games. Do I play some games? Sure, I'll play a couple games here and there. I like doing Warcraft 3 with my cousin. That's Warcraft 3. That's before World of Warcraft existed. I play some Black Ops with a friend of mine once a week, and we go through the map of the round of maps, and that's about it. And that's about the extent of the gaming that I do. So I'm not a complete anti-gamer, don't hear that, and I'm not a complete pro-gamer, so don't hear that. I'm kind of a casual guy that uses games just as a period of spending time with friends. And that's really about it. Gaming doesn't mean a lot else to me. So I'm kind of an outsider looking in on an industry. But I remember the old video games. In fact, I forgot to grab it. My latest book, I Am Not Amused. By the way, there is a Goodreads giveaway on this. We are giving away 100 copies of that on Goodreads. You can find that book over there, I Am Not Amused. Find that book page on Goodreads, and until March 31st, there is a giveaway going on over there. I spend a lot of time in there looking at entertainment, media entertainment, and a lot of there's not an over amount on games, but there is quite a bit that I do say on games in the gaming industry and what's in there. It's about entertainment as a whole. But going back and look at the old games, we have the old Atari games. Of course, I had a Magnavox Odyssey, if you remember that thing. A friend of mine had a Commodore 64. So we played a little bit of games. But you got to understand that back in those times, you really couldn't spend more than 30 minutes on a game because they got boring. And so Nintendo came out, and I kind of go through the history of how the gaming industry blew up in the book. And you can actually, I'll leave a link for it in the description down below if you're interested in that book. It's a very good book, very well researched. It took me about 4 years to write it. So in this world, though, the games started around the Nintendo Entertainment System was the first time we saw more complicated gameplay. We saw things like Metroid and Castlevania 2 and Zelda and Final Fantasy, which even required either complicated passcodes or onboard batteries to save your progress. And these provided the situations where you could spend a lot more time playing a single game. Even those, though, pale in comparison to what we can spend on video games in the modern era. Okay, but then it brings into this issue where probably about 15 or so years ago, gaming industries started to hire psychologists and figure out how to get people addicted to games. Now, when we start getting into the realm of addiction, you have some people that will sit back and say, oh, well, just don't get addicted. It's kind of like this court case going on with fentanyl right now, where they're just like, this company focused to make this highly addictive drug and then got a lot of society addicted to it. I mean, there's a pit of hell dedicated to these people. And I have the same issue where in our state here in Pennsylvania, they're starting to put, it's getting to the point now where alcohol's in your face if you go and get gas. Now, I lived in other states and I've traveled the country quite extensively. There is no other state I know of where I go into a convenience store and the alcohol is as ready as it is in Pennsylvania now. Understand that Pennsylvania was way on the other side. You had to go to special stores just to get alcohol, and they swung the pendulum so far that you got to trip over the crap to go in and pay for your gas. I have a problem with it because there are people that are legitimately addicted to alcohol and are trying to go through society without the temptation to get drunk. And so there's more to it than just this. There's a lot that goes into it to say, how can we help the people who don't want to be taken over by an addiction? And the problem we're starting to see is that video games are becoming made to be highly addictive. So much so they're hiring psychologists to do this. Now, there's shifts that we see. Of course, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, I mean, doctors were even prescribing cigarettes. I mean, yeah, think of that. Think of that in our current culture. Think of going to a doctor and he says, oh, well, here, I'm going to go get some cigarettes. It'll help you with your stress. It'll help you with your weight. I mean, talk about barbaric and archaic. And then somewhere around the 80s, there was this big war on the tobacco. They were no longer allowed to advertise in certain magazines. They were no longer allowed to advertise close to schools, things like this. And so what did the tobacco companies do? Well, they figured out how to make things addictive. They bought up all the food companies. And all the stuff they learned about addiction, they started to apply to the sugar industry. And that's exactly why the obesity rate started to shoot way up around the mid-80s. It was a conjunction of that and actually the release of the video games. Now, of course, they're going into the vaping. So I go into the gas station. I pay gas just this week, just a couple days ago. And the guy right ahead of me is buying some of that Juul, that vaping stuff. And I don't know if they're stopping sales altogether or if it was that one particular flavor. I'm not following what's going on in the regulation. I know there's some regulation coming. I don't remember what it is. But the guy buys up some Juul for vaping stuff, and he's like, oh, you're not getting any more of this. Like, no, he says, crap, just when I got addicted, now I can't get it anymore. Just think of that. That is a person, I don't know if he's being facetious in his argument or whatever else, but here's a guy who's threw out $45 for vaping supplies, complaining I won't be able to buy this anymore because I'm addicted to it and they're not making it now. Well, the tobacco companies are shifting in this direction. Oh, vaping, this is much safer than tobacco. You're still inhaling stuff into your lungs, people. This is not good stuff. All right. But the reality is that there's other industries that are close to the gaming industries that the gaming industries are starting to learn from. We're going to get into that industry in a little bit. But before we get into there, let's have a look at a couple of articles. So this one here is an unknown date. I don't know when this was out. Oh, actually, my apologies. It is not an unknown date. This is November 6, 2018. So we're talking about 6 months ago from when I'm recording this. Video game addiction. What are the 5 most addictive games of 2018? And so they're looking at video game addiction. So people are like, oh, you can't really get addicted to video games. The reality is you can. In fact, way back when World of Warcraft first came out, I was working at that time with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I was just chatting with my case manager at one point in time, and he was telling me of a friend of his that got so addicted to World of Warcraft, his friends finally pulled him away from the game for a night, and to cope with not being able to play these games, he got drunk, got a DUI, and all he was concerned about during his stay in jail was, is somebody paying the money into my account so I don't lose my character? He ended up getting out of jail and going to AA, not to deal with his alcohol problem, but to get off his World of Warcraft addiction. That's how bad some of these games are. And so, while there's some discussion and some debate, the vast majority of people will agree video game addiction, gambling addiction, porn addiction is indeed a real thing. All right, so 5 most commonly addicted games as of November 6, 2018. Fortnite addiction, and they're going to list the popular game in the genre as of right now, and then what type of genre it is. Solo competitive online games. This is like your World of Warcraft. And then we have League of Legends or team-based competitive online games. Battlefield, things like that could be as well. World of Warcraft, RPGs. RPGs, these are some of the most addictive games. The only ones more addictive than these is games like Tetris and Solitaire. Those are actually more addictive than these. Call of Duty, first-person shooters, and then they have Candy Crush, which is their representative for the mobile games. And so these are kind of the games. Now, and I cover Chapter 7 of this book actually goes into video game addiction, a little bit more detail, some of the psychology and the research and overcoming that. Of course, that is written from a Christian perspective. But with that being said, there's a lot of good, useful tips in there about overcoming the addictions. The problem is that the video game industry is morphing into the casino industry. So one of the places that I traveled through a lot extensively was Nevada. And in fact, my mother was a Keno runner in Reno. And so I'm fairly knowledgeable about this particular situation. And so going through and looking at casinos, a casino these days, well, back in the old days, 30, 40 years ago, it was definitely a lot more about cards, about card games. Maybe you got some roulette. But now if you go into a casino, it is pretty much, it looks like a video arcade. Everything is single machines. People are just sitting there with a cup full of tokens. Dave Ramsey, get out of debt, people. You got your cup full of tokens. Of course, they use tokens rather than real money, because it causes a dissociation of how much you're actually spending. So you just sit there and feed the tokens, hit the buttons. It's like a video arcade, only real money can come out of these machines. Then when's this article written? I'm not sure when this article's written here. But they're talking here about the various things that the casinos have done that keep people addicted to the gambling that are starting to become implemented into the video game industry as a whole. And so, of course, we have mobile games, we have sequels. Why produce some new game when you can produce a sequel that you know is going to automatically sell to your fan base? I said I play Black Ops. Okay, I play Black Ops version 1. That's what we play. I don't really care for sequels. Not a big fan. And so they're creating a variety of addictive things. So like the free-to-play addictive games. The idea is to get as many people addicted to it as you can because it's free, but your core group of people is just going to pump real money into the thing. Or maybe you're just being ad-supported. And then there's casino type games. So these types of games here where it ends up just kind of being very much like going into a casino. Now there's regulations about what differentiates a video game from a gambling situation, dealing with, are things random, are things based on chance, or things based on skill. One of the games I helped somebody develop was kind of based on that. A lot of people are like, oh, it's like gambling. No, it's not gambling. It was a skill-based game. It was just kind of hard to differentiate. I told the guy, you got to keep an eye out for, changes in the laws, because in recent months, some of the laws around this are changing thanks to the greed associated with loot boxes. Now the guy's working on a game that is mostly dealing around loot boxes. I'm like, dude, you got to stay up on the regulation. Your game may be illegal by the time it's out. Okay, and so this is not an industry I'm completely ignorant of. Now, psychologists, of course, speak out against persuasive design. Now, this doesn't relate to gaming as much as it relates to other things like Facebook and other social media accounts, but it's very interesting to me that a bunch of psychologists are speaking out against the addictive trends that are being placed inside your video game industry, but they're not actually speaking about the video game industry at all. They're like, oh, this is bad. Kids have 10 times the amount of screen time as they did in 2011 and spend an average of 6 hours and 40 minutes using technology. I'm guessing that's a day. Just kind of looking at all these things. Letter signed by 50 psychologists sent to the American Psychological Association accusing psychologists working at tech companies of hidden manipulative techniques. The reality is, though, that is why these companies are hiring psychologists. Video game companies hire psychologists to figure out how to get people hooked to the game. This is complete immorality in the professional field, in my personal opinion. What do you think? Let me know. Is it unethical? Is it immoral for a psychologist to use their skill to inform a company of how to get people addicted to the game? And then, of course, when somebody's life falls apart because of a video game addict, they're like, well, you can turn it off. No, you don't understand an addiction. You can't just turn off an addiction. When you get somebody addicted to it, this is a problem. This is why it's not as easy as some people are suggesting. I'm not saying that, in fact, I'm saying here there's not an easy solution to all this. All right, but here is the article. Are you ready? This came out yesterday at the time I'm recording this. Are you ready for where I look at this and go, wow, we need to pause and put on the brakes a little bit. Valve software dreams of analyzing your brain waves to tailor in-game rewards. We can figure out what kinds of rewards you like and the kinds you don't. So this is, of course, they're very clear. Where's that statement? They're very clear. This is just something they would like to do. Yeah, right. Just like the Google released video, right? The my brain is not working apparently. Selfish ledger, just like the selfish ledger is. This is just a concept. No, it's not. It's something they're working on. So this is from Valve, of course, the owners of Steam and numerous other games. Which I believe Valve started with Half-Life. Is that correct? All right. So what the idea is they want to see. Let me just start by reading some of the article here. So they have a flat structure. Most of its game-making staffers have vague titles, with a few exceptions. Principal experimental psychologist who presented a futuristic gaming vision at this year's Game Developers Conference. In particular, he made a few peculiar admissions about how Valve might one day study your brain activity in the middle of a game and what the company might do with it. Before speaking, he laid out a very loud disclaimer about the vision tracks of the panel. Supposed to be speculative. This is one possible direction things should go, or things could go. Even with that caveat in mind, his choice of details is interesting. All right, so the idea here is that they want to figure out, they're basically saying that if you go into a psychologist's office, then you can talk and communicate with them. The psychologist asks questions, you give answers, and based on this, they can develop this basic profile, is what the theory goes. Well, they're saying, well, we can figure this stuff out just by seeing how you manipulate the controller. Which buttons you push, when you push them, why you push them can tell us a whole lot about what's going on inside of your mind. And so figuring this out, now they can figure out what types of things will get you hooked on the game, will keep you in the game longer, will get you to buy a loot box, will get you to spend real money. This, to me, is the most frightening thing that I'm not sure if I ever care to play a modern video game in my life. This is the problem, is that you can get hooked so much into these companies. What are they really doing in the background? They're hiring psychologists, paying them a lot of money in order to figure out how to get people hooked and addicted onto the video games. All right. So the idea here is figure out what it is you want and then sell it to you. This is simply a way to take you as a person and extract every piece of revenue out of you that they possibly can. This is not going to lead anywhere good. This is a dangerous place to be, and we need to start recognizing this in the scope of this world. So those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Is this a creepy vision? Is this something you think they're probably working on? Is this something that you would trust Valve with this information? Let me know your thoughts. Again, this book, I Am Not Amused, there will be a link in the description down below. I'll give you the link to the page if you want to buy it directly from me, or the Amazon page if you want to go with Amazon as well. So you can pick that up, and it's available in softcover, in ebook, and in audiobook formats. I haven't checked if it's on Audible yet. It should be there very shortly if it's not yet. So you can have a look at that. If you want to help support the channel, have a look at the links above me or in the description down below, and check us out on social media if you want updates to the channel. So thanks for coming along, and hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.